Alright, this is all about Salt Lake City and the mysteries relating to this place that has incredible architecture that seemed to kind of come out of nowhere in the mid-1800s. The place was founded around the 1840s with about 140 guys as they moved from the temple in around the Chicago, Illinois area that they were at. Brigham Young became the guy in the 1840s as he beat out this other competitor who they basically expelled after he beat him. So Brigham Young was the new guy. And so one of the first things that they had to do was build the temple, or one of the first things they wanted to do was build this temple. So this guy is the architect of the temple, Truman O. Angle, and he's credited with this, and he was part of the Church of Latter-day Saints for a long time as an architect. So here's one of the mysteries, because I want to just get right into it. This picture right here and this right here tell a completely different story, and this book is about Salt Lake City and its environs. And this is a Google picture, a Wikipedia picture from 1892. Remember that, temple, 1892. Whereas the one on the right is from the same book that I was talking about before, where it says the temple was completed in 1880. Yet in that book, the picture of the temple is already with the steeples on top. So this is an anomaly that's very interesting, and here talks about the artist who designed the fresco on the inside. Now this is a very elaborate drawing. It talks about all these different things. Even just drawing the other temples from the Mormons is a very intense feat as an artist. So he drew amazing temples, he drew Moses, the Savior, Elijah, he drew the emblematical hive of Deseret in the all-seeing eye. He covered so much area, so much space. Imagine it is an incredible artwork that is very time-consuming and very impressive. And this is the artist that's credited, W.C. Morris, who was born in 1874, yet the temple was completed in 1880. So this guy completed this when he was 6 years old, which is pretty impressive. Now, I also have considered the fact that maybe it was his dad or something, but there's no real sign of that anywhere, and online it doesn't say anything about another W.C. Morris. So it's really, I think, an anomaly. These two examples point out things that I think we all have to look for, is our different texts telling different stories, and because of how controlled texts are and who writes the history, you really have to look at things from totally different angles, and these are signs that kind of lead us in an interesting direction. This city is a crazy place. There's a lot of mystery around it. Its layout, we've seen so many different Google Earth images were different layouts. Like, was this a layout they just repurposed? Was it already here? Did they do all this? Did they work as hard as is it possible to work this hard with so few people and a little bit of money and make something really amazing? Especially because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere at the time. I'd be very interested to see if you could experiment and put a group of people in the middle of nowhere and see if they can even come close to building even a block out of this. But these buildings are so similar to European buildings that are hundreds of years old with mysterious origins sometimes, but from a clearly distant past. These are very similar buildings, and this one's in the middle of Salt Lake City. It definitely requires questioning, especially when they occasionally will slip up and have texts that have different things, different stories. $3 million for this building, yet it said in one thing that Brigham Young and they only had about $400,000 in one of the books. So the stories are just so different, and as time goes on, it's like that game Telephone. It just keeps changing. The whole narrative just keeps evolving. If someone tells someone this and elaborates, and it just keeps going. That's what it seems like happened a lot of the place. And this nature is amazing. They clearly found some amazing nature here, and some of these towers and these different things that are here, these monuments, arches, they are absolutely amazing, and they make me wonder if any of those were buildings at one point. Those could have been thousands of years old. Thousands of years ago, those could be towers that have since burned, eroded with weathering, have been destroyed by civilizations, dynamited, exploded. They could be anything, because they look like remnants of a tower, or they look like remnants of a distant ocean, which is also a possibility. But they really look like structures sometimes. Some of the blocks are just too hard to believe, and some of these buildings, like the one in Philadelphia, 20 feet thick or 18 feet thick, when they are destroyed, they would clearly look like rubble, and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference because they're all gone. And so these things could have been amazing towers. Inside them could be hollow, and they could have interesting things. There could be treasures still left in there, tunnels all over the place. Subterranean things are all over this world, and ancient cultures have been doing it forever. And I have a feeling they were capable of traveling and doing a lot of different things. Mining, exploring, flying potentially. We don't know. The Jesuits, the Christians, the Mormons, all of them, just because they didn't talk about something or they didn't know something, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. This nature and land of Earth is clearly very old and we know nothing. The symbols and histories we've been presented with just tell something different. They tell of something, they show of some kind of knowing source somewhere. This juvenile instructor is kind of their Mormon pamphlet that they would send out every month or something that told a lot of different things. And there's a lot of interesting things you can read and insight you can gain from reading into some of these texts in this video and within the archives. And they talk about the arrival in this section and how it was, how like the different details of it, the story that's continued, the myth, the fable, the true story, whatever it is, I really don't know. But they tell about it, and this thing is incredible. This Salt Beach Pavilion looks like one of the greatest places on Earth. I wish it was still around. I don't know who would have ever gotten rid of something so spectacular. It seems like you'd be able to make a lot of money with this now. There should be hotels all around this. The place should be a bustling zone, but instead they got rid of it. And why is that? Is it to hide some mysterious past, or because they didn't like it? They wanted to put up some wooden stick hut instead, or put a little tiny pier. Unless they underestimated the effect the salt would have on the wood in the structure of this thing. Maybe that was a reason, but I don't know. I think they would have probably figured that part out before building something so massive and expensive. One of the books was talking about how polygamy led to a new style of housing being created because they needed all different doors and different entryways and styles almost to please all the different wives and have them able to do different things at different times, and leading to one of the biggest houses in Salt Lake, Brigham Young's, was this famous Eagle Gate, which led to a creek canyon and also led to this massive private grounds that God knows what happened. I think he had like 18 plus wives. I don't know how many children, and this is his favorite wife's place that he built for her, which is pretty nice. So this guy had a lot of money. Where was his money coming from? The Temple Palace is $3 to $5 million. This girl's got a palace. He's got a mansion palace. Like, that's a lot of money. And even with a lot of money in the middle of nowhere, how do you start building stuff? Like, who do you call in if you're one of the first people? How do you get all these specialists that are into all these things? The architects, the builders, the crafters, the sculptors, everything. These are some crazy houses that were around during the time. Some of them look a lot like they do now. You know, we've seen a lot of these. Some have probably survived around. I wonder if in the Salt Lake any of these have survived. But then I mean, they're pretty elaborate. They've got some nice tops, and it's amazing how they were able to just move into a place like this and start building a civilization that has just a very great stuff. And it's very impressive. These houses are great. Some of them you see today. I feel like I've been in a couple of things that look around like that. And these were very interesting with the power lines. There's a lot of power here, and you know, that's like kind of a little different than the story that they try to tell about there barely being any until that World's Fair moment. And you know, there was probably power a long time ago. The wires, there's a lot of wires there, a lot of them. And this is a steam. You know, each one of these buildings, I think, had a sustainable system of heating and cooling and doing all different kinds of amazing things, keeping the air going around. Systems we probably don't even know anymore. Their gardens always look really nice. So they most likely had ways of irrigating their gardens and plumbing and all different kinds of systems that must have been in play to keep this stuff going. And everything looks really clean, looks very nice. They really respected these zones and areas and spaces that they lived back then. They really, really did. Were all those wires just for electricity, or were there some for telegraph or different forms of other communication or other methods of power? It could have been anything. I can't help but wonder about these elaborate tops, these golden domes, these metal devices, these mechanisms, whatever they are. Whether they're radiating something or ready to embrace something, I don't know. But I believe that if lightning were to strike those, something were to happen. Like maybe it sends like a power through the house that it allows, there's another generator in there that allows it to be controlled. Like, who knows? You know, they had trains clearly coming in, so I guess that's how they could bring in the materials, which makes sense. But, you know, the trains had to be laid there to the tracks. Like, that's a lot of work. All this stuff takes years, and these factories are massive. Like, you know, how long, just maybe the timeline, maybe the years that they say these places were established are just wrong, and, you know, the only texts that let out were ones that went with the official story. But these, these might have, I don't understand. I really don't get it. But I'm very impressed if they are capable of building all these things. But either way, back to those tops. I really think that if lightning, maybe there's some kind of mechanism that once lightning struck a building or struck one of those tops, that they were able to then store a lot of power, and then they could use it for heat with the copper in the walls or different kinds of things, the furnaces that are designed specifically. Like, I don't know, I believe they had some other purpose for those tops because they're so detailed, they're so precise, and they're very unique, and they have to be something. They're devices of some kind that I believe we lost. Maybe Tesla knew. He was one of the ones that was able to continue to track it down. He was on the right path to bringing it all back. I'm going to go into that in a later video. Tesla's a big influence of mine. I love it. But just enjoy these buildings. They're all very interesting, and this is from the 1800s of late 1800s of Salt Lake City. And when places, I guess, had a lot of money flowing into them and people and trains, they were able to do a lot. And the hotels coming in for the businessmen and all the people traveling. And I always like to look at the ads because they tell an interesting story too. You get to see who was working at the time, what they were thinking, who's offering a particular job, a particular trade, bookbinding, banks. They always have massive buildings that look like Piranesi back then. Real estate, how it just shows how some similarities between nowadays, their methods of advertising and showing particular things. Music, their organs. They have an amazing organ, which you'll see in a little bit from the tabernacle. And music is an amazing, oh wow, speaking of, and you'll see music is just an unbelievable thing. I'm going to go into that later too, but these buildings are so crazy. How do they do it? So detailed. They build residences and theaters and hotels, and they seem to care a lot about the arts and the importance of music. The tabernacle, the sound in this thing is perfect. It's absolutely an ancient formula to be able to make one sound in one spot and be able to hear it everywhere. And they felt that sound was important. Sound baths and things were unbelievable. I think a very important healing mechanism. $1 million here. Look at this, the only building of its kind in the world, the Salt Air Palace, the inside of the Kenyon Hotel, grand staircase. All these places are very nice. There's all kinds of different things around, fans, lights. It looks perfect. This place looks amazing, and it doesn't seem like Salt Lake City has this stuff around it anymore. It doesn't seem like they use the lake as a tourist mechanism. They certainly don't advertise it as a pleasure resort. Last time I drove by there on a cross-country trip, it looked pretty much like a pile of salt, a lake of salt, and there wasn't much around it. Maybe some industry somewhere, but there was nothing like this. This is a palace. Look at that. That almost... I can't, it looks like something from like Star Wars or something. You'd see in another planet. This thing is amazing. Great organ, and they really believed in the power of sound, and especially as a healing and way to transcend. Firmly believe they utilized music in a far different way in our human past, and I know for a fact, and I'll go into that in a different video really deep, but these places, they were designed to get some sound into you and really feel it. And really, when I say transcend, I mean like embrace all these things, all these ideas, all these visions. You can do so much with the power of music. And just these are some clips from random books, Salt Lake City and its environs. It's a very cool book. You can check it out on archive.org. There was a few other books that were in here that showed most of the pictures and just kind of photographic guides. You can find those easy by just searching. Most of these were from the 1880s. Some of the pictures were probably tiny bit later, but very interesting stuff. A lot of mystery about this city, and I don't know what the truth is about the history of it. I really don't know. I know what got out. That's what we all end up seeing. But I don't know what came before in the distant past, and it's foolish of me or anyone else to claim that they know for a fact what happened millions, hundreds, thousands of years ago. Nobody knows. And so this artwork is the road inspired by a cross-country trip me and my wife took to spread some art a few years ago. And while driving through these places, you have a lot of time to think, and I love thinking, and I really love thinking about the archaeological past and just the structure of the universe's geologic past, and wondering what civilizations were here before and what it was before. Was it an ocean? Were there like distant civilizations that were just huge, that their stuff all got lost, all got buried, all got swept away? Were there giant trees that were massive and we're seeing the stumps? Were there civilizations carved into everywhere? Are there underground civilizations right below it? Is this a hive? Is this whole thing a hive? The Mormons right in that method. But who knows? I really don't, and I love thinking about it. So let's keep putting it all together, and have a great one, everybody. Piece it together.